My name is Keith Klain. I'm the COO of Doran Jones, which is a software testing consultancy that works primarily in New York. I have run large enterprise-wide testing organizations for banks. My last job was with Barclays, running their global test center, which was about 1,700 testers spread across their investment bank and wealth management businesses. Before that with Citigroup, and before that with UBS Investment Bank. So I spent a lot of time in financial services running large testing organizations, and before that I worked as a consultant for a while. So when people ask me what do I talk to a CIO about in regards to testing, my advice is typically to people to not talk to them about testing. My goal as the person who's the subject matter expert in the organization about software testing is that that's my responsibility to make sure we're doing great testing, we're giving people the right training and skills, and I want them to feel comfortable that I'm looking after that side of the shop. A lot of people think you need to try and translate what we do in software testing for CIOs or CTOs or whoever it is, so that they can try and understand what we're doing. And I think that's the wrong approach in a lot of instances. What you want to do when you're talking to a CIO is stick to two basic things. And I either want them, it's a simple framework, and I either want them to know something or I want them to hopefully do something. And that means what I'm telling them can't be about test case counts or metrics or pass-fail ratios or any of the other kind of lexicon that the testing industry has built around that, because I run testing and I barely care about those topics. So what I want to understand is, how does my organization and my role in the organization help the business be successful? How aligned is our approach to our business strategy? What risks to our business am I helping identify and mitigate through our test approach? That's a much more meaningful conversation than trying to talk to them about testing. So when I say, how do you talk to a CIO about testing, my usual advice is, don't talk to them about testing. Talk to them in an intelligent way about the business and how we're helping contribute to that, so that they're comfortable that our approach to testing is aligned towards the business. Let's talk about automation. What does it actually do? Does it cover unknowns? Does it help manage risk in a way of things that we can't anticipate? Or is it only looking at things that are confirmatory in nature that we've already known scenarios? Saying that we're just going to automate all our unit tests and therefore don't need to do any manual testing isn't based on any empirical evidence. That's someone's opinion. And it's not based on any facts that has been borne out in the industry that just doing automated unit tests is any kind of guarantor of quality or success or any of that. I'd love to see a study that someone has done that proves that. So that is a highly subjective opinion that's being expressed. And there's some understanding that needs to happen around what testing is, what checking is, and how those two fit together. Those conversations are so much more meaningful, and I was talking to a CEO about this the other day of a company that we're working with. That paradigm of testing, checking, machine checking, human checking is so useful. I think people are scared to talk about it. I think they are. I think testers are, because we don't want to redefine something or just seem like we are calling something different that it's not. But that paradigm is so useful in helping people understand where people fit into this, helping define what is the value of what we're doing, and it helps put language around something that for so long has just been about test case counts and trying to drive out as much operational value to something that's so much more meaningful. And every time I have that conversation with the CEO, CIO, CTO, whoever it is, or head of development, they instantly adopt the language and start changing it. And I think the problem is that testers are afraid of it. They're afraid of introducing something that is going to get knocked down. And it just to me, I think it just takes some guts. And when you really understand it and have read it, and talk to Michael Bolton, talk to Ian McCowett, talk to James Bach, the people who put that paradigm together, right? And Michael was the one who defined it. They'll help you learn how to articulate that. But it is so meaningful. And I'm telling you, I've talked to a lot of CIOs in my particular business. Now that I'm out with the new company talking to a bunch of different CIOs, it is so meaningful and adds so much to the dialogue. You just have to go there, and particularly when you're trying to articulate to folks about the shallowness and confirmatory nature of automation, it gets to the heart of why a lot of companies are unhappy and unsatisfied with their automation approach. And they think that by automating all this stuff that is just confirmatory checks, machine checking, that it's going to eliminate the human side of it, right? And that's not going to happen. And what it does is put a framework around it, helping to explain why that's not happening. So I found it incredibly, incredibly useful. But I've also read it, talked to them, digested, and have made it part of my own language. So yeah, I find it incredibly useful. So I think there's a couple ways to do that, and one of them is the meaningfulness of the value of the information that we're providing to the organization. And if the mission of testing is information, so then how do we, I don't think you can quantify that, but how do we, if in kind of qualitative measures, how do we look at we're adding value to the decision-making process? There's no good answer for that. And I would say, if we are part of the overall program or IT structure, how are we as a whole demonstrating our value to the organization? And then I'll align towards that. So if there's whatever metric or measure they're looking at for how many releases we put out a year, and some organizations have crazy ideas like that, how often we deliver releases, how much functionality is in those, how you would hope there'd be things like revenue, market share, something around that we've defined the success criteria for our business and then work back from that. So I very much try and align my teams towards what are our large objectives as a business and how are we helping to contribute to that. If you're going to take slices of an organization, and which is your IT structure is highly integrated, and there's a lot of interdependencies between what development doing, what's testing doing, what's project management is doing. All those things are highly dependent on each other. To then slice one single piece and say, well, how do we define the value of that? When you start pushing back on that, I think people typically back off, and as well. When you start asking the questions of how are we, tell me how to define the value of our whole organization, and then I'll figure out how I'm contributing to that. A lot of those arguments fall apart from there as well. If you just ask, how do you define the value of your development teams? Most people would struggle to answer that question. Where testers run into problems is that we don't, because the mission of testing for a lot of organizations is not correct. It's either trying to give people confidence or it's trying to show coverage. It's not about information. So what we do is we create all these monstrosities of metrics and measures and dashboards and all the other, administrata that comes from what I refer to as the coloring in boys. And we push that out to people for ourselves to try and get out in front of that, which actually ends up undermining our whole value proposition, because when you start to strictly quantify things, then you are literally telling people to look at me as a number in a spreadsheet and start to reduce my value from there, because then you get into commoditization, then you're getting into where can I do this cheapest, and lots of bad decisions. So I actually feel the kind of operational test management business does this to ourselves. Preparation is everything. So whenever you're going to talk to a CIO or CEO, or you think you might, right? Knowing who those people are, knowing what's important to your business, and there's some great things you can do around that. So if you work for a publicly traded company, pull the SEC forms off of your own website, or buy a share and pull your I can't remember what the document is, but anyway, you can read basically their annual report they have to give to the SEC. And in that report highlights all their risks and issues and business challenges and what their competitor analysis, and know what that stuff is, right? And help align your test strategy towards that. The other thing you can do is listen to your CFO calls and help your CIO answer the questions that the CFO has been asked. So whether it's media relations people, investors, regulators, they will get asked questions to your CFO. Help them identify answers to those questions, and these are big ticket things. I'll give you an example of where this has just worked recently with me. So we were talking to a CEO of a company we're going to be doing some business with, and he started straight in on automation, operational efficiency, wanting to reduce cost, all that kind of stuff that typically goes straight into tactics, right? And I said, hang on, what are the big things that you're worried about that you're going to do to your clients? And kind of the RCA dog, And I said, no, what we need to figure out is, what are you going to do to your clients in a bad way if they use your systems if we don't test properly? And took another moment of pause, and he said, we haven't really thought about it that way before. I said, right? And that's typical, right? People think of, that's the great thing about the test and checking paradigm. It helps reframe the discussion. So now we can start to talk about, well, what are the risks we're injecting to your clients? And we had a whole great conversation around data loss, on the routing, on all sorts of great things we hadn't talked about before, that are the things we should be working back from. So let's figure out what we might do, figure out how we test around those, and then work back from there. So I think having that conversation with the CEO, that was nothing to do with testing. That wasn't anything to do about test case structure, test strategy, anything to do around that. That was about your business. How am I going to get you information to help you make decisions about releases and what you could do or help your clients with? And that actually reframes testing, I think, was what we've always wanted, to be looked at holistically. So we should be testing our ideas, we should be testing our designs, we should be testing our plans, when you focus on the big stuff and work back from there.